several years, and this award is given to two girls, high school girls, who have faced a difficult situation, and they talk about how they, by the resilient skills, how they overcame this hardship in their life. The Barb Dubetsky Scholarship is named in honor of Barb Dubetsky, who was the executive director of the Women's Fund for more than 2 decades. Barbara was a valued leader and a gatherer of people, and she always was ensuring that the Women's Fund was successful. Unfortunately, several years ago, Barbara lost her valiant cancer battle, and that was such a sadness for all of us, because she was the fighter up until the very end, and she really exemplified what the Women's Fund is doing for, which is resiliency. And I've got a resilient voice, so y'all keep on listening. But in order to honor her memory, we have a scholarship named in her honor. And this year's recipients will each receive a $2,500 scholarship. And what I would like to do now is introduce the 2021 Barbara Dubetsky Annual Scholarship recipients. I want to read just a short paragraph from each one of these girls' essays that they wrote. So our first one is navigating life as a woman in America and Vietnam were similar in the sense that women were treated as second-class citizens. However, in America, my race was presented as an issue, and the oppression I experienced was amplified. In American society, Asian women are viewed as docile, submissive beings. Although my mom tried to instill her belief into me, I refused to become fragments of her projected desirabilities. Instead of plaguing myself with the burdens of my past and my mom's teachings, I decided to carefully process what I was feeling. After examining my emotions, I realized my circumstances do not determine my future or who I am as a person. I decided to turn them into my source of motivation to move forward instead. Our first recipient is Wen Lee, a graduating senior at Taylor High School in A-Lee School District. She will attend the University of Houston this fall and will major in biology. And our second essay, a quick little short paragraph of hers. At the age of 11, I was thrown a curveball in life where I had a choice to make. I had to respect the situation and decide what my future would look like as someone who was facing deep grief, pain, and sorrow. I learned it was okay not to be okay. I acknowledged my weakness and suffering, and in that space, found that respecting the process of grief ultimately strengthened me for the longevity of this specific journey. The choices I have made in my healing journey have helped me face my fears rather than run from them. I believe that the challenges in my life, whether big or small, have developed in me a kind of strength I might not have known existed. I wonder what opportunities I would have missed if I had not bravely decided to keep moving forward. And this is from Grace Barfield, a senior at Stratford High School. She will graduate this May in the Spring Break School District. She will attend the University of Oklahoma. She also plans to major in biology. These two were really just outstanding. I was one of the graders on those, and they were just outstanding essays to read from these girls, because each one of them overcame their own struggles. But Wen and Grace, would you please join me up front? Thank you. Y'all were outstanding. Absolutely. All right, I have one more announcement to make. We have another award. Sue Trammell Whitfield was a member of the Board of Trustees for many years, and she was a very active board member. And we also have an award that is named in her honor and in her memory. It's the Sue Trammell Whitfield Award for Resiliency. And it was inspired by Sue's tireless leadership over the years to improve the health and wellness of women and children. This award honors individuals who have improved and strengthened the health and wellness of Houston area women and adolescent girls. We have several of our past honorees with this, and I would like to acknowledge some of those. And I would like to ask last year's winner, Edna Meyer Nelson, to come up as we give the award to our honoree this year. But just so you all know, Dr. Braden and Jane Braden, who are sitting right over here at this table, they are a past recipient. And I'm not sure if any of our other winners are here. Babe Pence, I don't see Babe or Jane Clark at full, but I know that Jane and David are here, and we think y'all were past recipients of the award. You deserve it. It was great. This year, the award goes to Martha Walton. As Martha is making her way up the red carpet, I just want to say that Martha is a member and has been a long-time member of the Board of Trustees and on the advisory board. She is very active in Houston philanthropy. She has served on the board of directors of John P. McGovern Health Care, and she is currently serving in the capacity of chair of their advisory board. That's just two of the things that she does. She is very active, and we are so excited to have one of our own who was chosen for this award. She's speechless, which doesn't happen. So that was great. So let's turn it over to Andrea. All right. I would like to bring Andrea up. Andrea works in the women's fund. I'm not going to begin to tell you what she does because it's a little bit of everything. So take it away, Andrea.
Hi guys, I'm Andrea Watkins. I am the program supervisor for the Women's Fund. Thank you for being here. It's such a delight to see everyone again. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our today's speaker. She happens to serve on our advisory board. Dr. Fernell Chestnut is an associate professor at the University of Houston College of Medicine, and she's a dual board certified physician in both internal medicine and pediatrics. She can do it all. She graduated summa cum laude from Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University with a Bachelor's of Science degree in biology, and completed her graduate medical education and residency training at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. She is currently preparing for clinical education for the inaugural class of students at the University of Houston College of Medicine, where she serves as the longitudinal integrated clerkship director. Dr. LaCour Chestnut also enjoys partnering with various community organizations like herself, schools, and churches to provide health and wellness. So without further ado, let's give it to Dr. LaCour Chestnut.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here with you guys in person. Glad to see all of your smiling faces. Today, we will talk a little bit about life after the pandemic. Where are we going? And what's up with that? So before, I would like to just say hello and congratulations on Grace and Ben who are pursuing degrees in biology. I'm hopeful that that means that you're going to go on and be a physician. We need more women physicians and leaders in medicine. So congratulations in advance. And hopefully you will look towards University of Houston College of Medicine for your medical school that come back to Houston from Oklahoma and continue on at University of Houston. So hopefully I will see you both in the future. All right, so where do we go from here? Where do I go personally, and where do we all go? You can go to the next slide. So, that's all. The pandemic is over, let's just jump back into our regular life. Well, that's not said or done. And I think that we have to first reflect a little bit on what we've gone through as a community, personally, before we can talk about even moving forward. So what we'll do here is just review really quickly where we've been, where we are in this global pandemic, and then how do we move forward, all right? So this is COVID-19 globally, right? We have had close to 160 million cases worldwide. The reason why I wanted to highlight that is because we are a global, not just economy, but global community. We share so many different things across the globe. And I wanted to at least acknowledge that, yes, here in the United States and locally here in Houston, we are moving towards having so many more people vaccinated at much lower numbers of COVID-19 infection. But I did want to acknowledge that in places like India, where we share many economic as well as personal, medical, and maybe even relationships with India, they're being hit very hard right now. And when we say there's a pandemic and it's global, even though we're improving our cases here at home, we can still be affected, and we still want to highlight that there's still a lot of struggle going on in other parts of the world. All right, next slide. But here at home in Houston, I always like to highlight that the Texas Medical Center and their website is a great resource to really help you and I figure out where do we go. So you can see that these are the weekly average of positive COVID-19 cases. We had our first peak way back in last summer, and then our largest peak was right before the holidays, averaging at the most around 4,200 cases per week. And now we're back here. So this is fantastic. It's great to see that 500 approximately. I remember when those numbers were ticking up in the beginning from 100 on average to 200 to 300 to 400. And we were like, whoa, this is real. And it got really real. For many of us, we have either known people, lost people, been associated with people, or been impacted personally by COVID-19. So we don't want to play down that this is a very serious disease, but we do want to look forward that these things are improving. And how are they improving? Why are they improving? And what can we do moving forward? These are hospitalizations as well. As a physician, this was one of the key markers that I was looking towards to see how can we move back to some sense of normalcy. If we are having so many people who are hospitalized, are we going to overwhelm our resources in terms of medical care? And could we experience something similar to what India is going through now? But we're over the hurdle, right? So it's fantastic to see, again, that our hospitalizations are back down to around 100 people being hospitalized per day. So that's great. If you ever want to, again, look at www.tmc.edu, great resource to see, look how far we've come in the Houston area, thanks to the leadership, as well as thanks to vaccinations, which is the bottom part, okay? So vaccinations have done us some good. It has really allowed us to decrease those numbers of patients who are actively infected with COVID-19. Okay, next slide. So hopefully there are lots of people here who have gotten their vaccinations. If not, if you're unable to, or if you can still have concerns, I do want to mention that I am open and available. If you still have any concerns and you want to discuss them with me privately, I'm happy to answer any questions. But vaccinations are a big part of how we got here. So in the US, we have administered over 200 million vaccinations. And this is part that's only about 30% of the population. But with the good news that we got this week that children ages 12 to 15 are able to get vaccinations, I think we'll be moving even more towards population immunity. So I hate to say herd immunity, but it's more so about the population. If you want to talk about your herd or your people, so the people in my home, we're 50% in terms of herd immunity. So my husband and myself have gotten vaccinated. My son, who's 13, got his first dose yesterday, but my 11-year-old, she's not eligible. So when we talk about the whole entire population, sure don't make up, or do make up a significant part of that. So we do need to think about how can we protect them moving forward. Next one. And this is just a picture of the United States and what percentage in that particular state have been fully vaccinated and what percentage have gotten at least one dose. So this is the screen for fully vaccinated. And we have in the darker areas, they're leaning more towards 40%. The lighter areas are closer to 30% in that state that are vaccinated. So this can also help you moving forward to know how is everybody doing in this particular state and help us in terms of public health measures and how we want to proceed. So for those who are fully vaccinated, that means you've had at least 2 weeks after your 2-dose series of the 2-dose vaccine, or 2 weeks after your single-dose vaccine. The one thing to mention is that even though you might be fully vaccinated, there are people in our community who still might not have full protection against COVID-19. Meaning, if you are someone who you have had both vaccinations, but you're actively undergoing chemotherapy for a malignancy, if you are on chronic steroid medications, if you are on any other immunosuppressive medications, that means that you might be fully vaccinated, but are you fully protected? Probably not. So you still have a reason to be immune suppressed, and your immune system might not respond how somebody who doesn't have those issues. All right. So what can we do if we are fully vaccinated and as more people around us become vaccinated? So this is a picture from the CDC, who really, like, I don't want to say threw a monkey wrench in my presentation, but who, as of yesterday, had to redo some slides and update some things this morning. But they gave us some good news, right, about wearing masks. The reason why some of that information came out and why we're explaining this in the medical community is because there was this question in terms of people who are fully vaccinated. Can they still transmit COVID-19 to other people who are not vaccinated? And from the studies that have been conducted, we are more clear that that's not the case. Typically, you do not shed virus, even though you're fully vaccinated and come in contact with COVID-19. So you aren't typically spreading the virus around to other people who are not vaccinated. And that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why there is this recommendation that came out yesterday that people who are fully vaccinated can feel comfortable indoors or outdoors not wearing a mask. Now, there are a few stipulations with that. We'll go over those in just a moment. But on the left-hand side, you see if you're not vaccinated, there are some things that you are more safe moving towards after the pandemic, meaning you can go outdoors, you can have lunch with your friends outdoors, you can exercise outdoors, hang out, all of those good things, fellowship with your friends and family outdoors without a mask. Everybody, vaccinated, unvaccinated, can do that. If you are in a large crowd though, if you're unvaccinated, you should continue to wear a mask. If you're vaccinated, even if you're in a large crowd, the recommendation is that you aren't very susceptible to getting COVID-19 as well as not passing it on to anybody else. So we can feel a little bit more comfortable moving forward in those spaces. Now indoors, here we are, we're all sitting amongst one another. We don't have our mask on while we're sitting here eating, and that's a good thing. Hopefully those who are unvaccinated feel comfortable that there's a large enough number of people who are vaccinated or far enough away. You're not, speaking, singing, shouting, all of those things that cause a lot of respiratory particles to come out of your mouth, basically, or nose onto other people. So these are things that you can feel a little bit more comfortable doing. If you are indoors, in crowds, singing, working out, going back to Orange Theory, hot yoga, all of those things that we like to do before the pandemic. So you should continue to wear a mask. But if you're vaccinated, you should feel comfortable that you can participate in those activities, including including those high intensity exercises, going to the movie theater, which my family used to enjoy like almost every Sunday. All of those things you should feel more comfortable after the pandemic, or at this point going forward doing if you are fully vaccinated. All right, next slide. So I used to use this slide to demonstrate how we should behave outdoors and in other scenarios when we meet people. And Bobby is the child, and this is Bobby's dad. And so if Bobby's dad is unvaccinated, there are some things now that are inaccurate here, and some things that are still accurate. So I don't know if you guys liked those highlights, little magazines when you were little, and you had to pick out what's right, what's wrong, what's different, all of those things. So this just reminded me of that. Instead of using it as a teaching tool, I'm like, oh, let's see what's the difference between unvaccinated Bobby's dad and vaccinated Bobby's dad. What can he do differently in this scenario? So for unvaccinated Bobby's dad, which of these should he continue doing? Does he need to wear a mask outside? No, nobody needs to wear a mask outside anymore, right? You're outdoors, he's not in a crowd, he's just walking on the sidewalk. So no need for that. Now, should we continue to wash our hands? Yes, we should, vaccinated or unvaccinated, we should continue to wash our hands. The third part is watching your distance, right? So if you are unvaccinated, I wouldn't necessarily get into a crowd of people if you can avoid it. But if you are, then you should still wear a mask. So this is supposed to simulate, that's Bobby the child, but it's supposed to simulate if you're in a crowd that you should wear a mask. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So on Bobby's vaccinated dad slide, there are several things that are incorrect, right? So Bobby's dad can walk outside with no mask, he can walk down the street, Bobby's dad can be at the playground with no mask, all of those things without a concern. Even at school, Bobby's dad can be indoors without a mask, without concern. Now, Bobby and his dad should still continue washing their hands, right? So we should all continue doing those things, but we don't have to worry as much about masking indoors or outdoors, unless there are certain scenarios. Go ahead. So some of those certain scenarios include for the father that he should continue wearing his mask on public transportation, if he's going to the doctor. So in healthcare settings, the reason why in healthcare settings you want to continue is because there are usually sick people who go to the doctor, right? So if you are in a room full of everybody who's visiting the doctor, you don't know who has a fever, you don't know who came there for symptoms, you don't know who came to the hospital for what. So that's one reason to continue in healthcare settings wearing a mask. Okay, so that will probably continue for some time. Public transportation, we're not really sure. The studies haven't shown, or we haven't really been able to investigate how public transportation impacts in terms of, because you have so many different people moving at once versus if you were somewhere like here, you don't have as great a number of people in and out. So if you're on the subway, there's lots of people who come in and out, it's less of a controlled setting. So in public transportation, still the recommendation is for everybody to wear a mask, vaccinated or unvaccinated. All right, children and teens and COVID. So hopefully, gratefully, thankfully, my son can go from this, which is what he did all this year, in front of the computer, taking school, even if they were physically at school, they're in front of the computer and the screen all day. So what we have shown, and the reason why a lot of the school districts are going away with or getting rid of the mask mandates and making them optional is because in HISD, 70% of they sent out a survey, and 70% of the staff have been vaccinated. Employees that are in the school districts. And if not, the majority of them have been, or actually all of them, have been offered a vaccine. So the rest are people who just decided on their own free will, just to not take the vaccine. So they're a little bit more comfortable saying that in this scenario, since 70% of the people are vaccinated, that masks are optional. That doesn't mean that you have to take it off. So this is what I was explaining a little bit about the information that came out yesterday. If you are uncomfortable and you still want to wear your mask, nobody's saying you have to take that off. It's nobody who's telling you that it's not allowed in here. So if you feel uncomfortable and you're are around or in a situation where you still want to wear your mask, please do so to make your own self feel comfortable. And I think that as we move a little bit further away from the immediate trauma going through the global pandemic, which we have all experienced this as a trauma, and that we will have a little bit more abilities to feel comfortable in certain settings. It took us a while to get here, so it's going to take us a while on the back end to be comfortable, allowing our children to go to school without masks, even if they've been vaccinated. So hopefully this push that we have now for 12 to 15-year-olds, many of them will also be in that 70% number or higher once they go back to school in the fall. All right, so what about play, sports, camps, and travel for kids? They are, for the most part, unable to be vaccinated at this time, if they're less than 12 years of age. And even if they are, will they be fully vaccinated by the time they go to summer camp? Will they be fully vaccinated by the time they attend summer school and go with you on that family vacation? It's still important for children, in my opinion, to wear a mask because they're not vaccinated, but also because even though they are most of them are asymptomatic, most children do not develop severe disease. COVID-19 infection in children has hospitalized more kids than H1N1. So we all remember H1N1, it was really big and very severe in children. There's been more hospitalizations in children, especially in the 12 to 15-year-old age group from COVID-19. And there is a multi-system inflammatory response that children can get after they've been exposed to COVID-19. So that's one reason why I would encourage, until your children are vaccinated, for them to continue to wear masks, just like you would for adults. In situations where there are crowds, in situations where there are a mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated people, also on public transportation as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about travel. How am I on time? Doing okay? All right. So this talks a little bit about travel. Those who are vaccinated can feel much safer that it is okay and a low risk to travel within the United States. For international travel, you really need to take a look at what the destination, what the numbers look like at your international destination. So, does your international destination have vaccinations widely available to their population? Are the resources in that particular country available for you if you happen to fall ill? And the variants. So that's the biggest question. We know that there hasn't been as much international travel into the United States or out of the United States. There has been some, but that there are variants in different parts of the world that, yes, they're present here in Houston, but not as such in large numbers as they are in other areas. So Brazil, South Africa, the UK, there's different variants in different populations. So just be aware of that as you get ready to travel internationally. That might be a reason that somebody who is vaccinated would continue to wear a mask in those areas, because we haven't been exposed to those variants. And we don't really know at this point with confidence that the variants that we will encounter, that the vaccine will for sure protect us against those. We think so, but the science isn't 100% here just yet. All right. So this is kind of like a do and do not. So for domestic travel, you can resume travel. You don't have to get tested before. If you've been fully vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine after domestic travel. You don't need to routinely test. International travel, you also don't need to quarantine after you get back if you've been fully vaccinated. You do need to get tested if your international destination requires you to test. So there are some areas that are still requiring despite vaccination. So I think like some of the islands that don't have a lot of medical resources, Barbados, maybe Antigua, I'm not sure about Bahamas, but they don't have a lot of resources. So if you come and you're positive, you know, there might be just 5 minutes or something on the whole island. So you don't want to be caught in that situation. So they're requiring tests. Who can, or what can vaccinated persons stop doing? So according to the CDC, you can stop wearing a mask, right? That came out yesterday. And I put for now for a reason and 2 caveats. So if you live or work in correctional facilities, homeless shelters, and other highly susceptible group living facilities, then you should continue wearing a mask indoors in those areas is the recommendation, just because it's a highly susceptible population, and there are lots of people kind of coming in and out, and sometimes crowded conditions, and those allow for more viruses to pass around. All right, can you go back just one more second? So the wearing mask, even though the CDC has said it's safe if you're vaccinated, that you don't have to wear a mask, you still need to follow if there's federal or businesses or other local entities that are requiring you to wear a mask. The reason being is that maybe sometimes there are local conditions at that business that their workers don't necessarily feel comfortable. And the business, if a lot of their workers end up getting sick from COVID, they might be held liable or responsible. So I think it's probably in their best interest, until there's some population immunity, to continue to ask people to wear a mask in their establishment. So that's just kind of FYI as to why some businesses will continue that instead of allowing the mask to go away. All right, next slide. So what should we keep doing? For all of those who are vaccinated, if you start experiencing symptoms, whether you're vaccinated or not, you should get tested. So if I was to leave here today and tomorrow I come down with fever, cough, extreme fatigue, I should get tested regardless of my vaccination status. And then, we're doing so well. We should continue to wash our hands. If you're unvaccinated, we've already talked about wearing a mask and also watching your distance. But you don't have to quarantine is the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So if you're exposed to somebody with COVID-19 and you're vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine. You just wait and see. Do you have symptoms? Then you get tested. If you don't have symptoms, great, because we don't think that you will develop symptomatic infection or need to be hospitalized or die from COVID infection. All right, so go to the next one. What are we still learning? We're still learning how long these vaccines are going to protect us, okay? So we'll keep our eyes and ears out for what happens with that over the coming several months. Will we need a booster? We don't know just yet. It's possible. We don't know how many people will need to be vaccinated in order to consider that there's population immunity. Some of that comes down to what the percentage of COVID-19 infection is in the community. So right now, according to the TMC, we're less than 5%. Typically, they say if you're less than 5% in the community, plus you've had less than 200 cases per day on average, that you do have some community protection. That also depends how much you're testing, right? So if we're not testing, we're not really detecting it. So there's lots of things that play there. So keep your eyes and ears out whether or not you'll need a booster in the fall. All right, we already talked about variants, so we'll go on to the next slide. All right, so moving forward in wellness, what are some of the things that people have been not doing to care for themselves that maybe they should have? Many of us, whether we were busy, stuck at home, working from home, schooling children from home, whatever you were doing, you might have put off some of your wellness care, such as pap smears, mammograms. So we really need to make sure that we're refocusing and getting back in to see our physicians for our preventative wellness. That's one way we can move into life after the pandemic. Don't be afraid to go see your doctor, okay? The next thing to look out for are respiratory viruses in the fall. So we had such low rates. I have never seen such low rates of influenza in my entire career. Why? Because everybody had a mask on. Usually we see RSV, babies come in wheezing, everybody's having, respiratory symptoms. Didn't happen. We all had masks on. So look for a resurgence, and those viruses did not go away. They still exist, okay? So look for a resurgence in that as we move into life after the pandemic. Also, in the medical community, we're seeing probably there'll be more advanced diseases due to people deferring medical care. There were children who did not get vaccines like they were supposed to, people who didn't get their cancer screenings, who kind of put things off. Oh, that, cough is nothing major, or that chest pain is nothing major since I was negative for COVID, and might present as cancers that we didn't detect early enough. Mental health and wellness. So this moves us to our last couple of slides. All of us, as I mentioned, have endured trauma over the past year or year and a half. we have went through something significant. Many of us will tell our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren about the year that we went through this pandemic, how everybody had to work from home, had to go to school from home, all of these things. And so it is a trauma, and we should recognize that not only have people endured that personally, but people have also lost loved ones. And so I think we should take some time for reflection on what was life like before the pandemic. What are some of the, you can go to the next slide. What are some of the things that we miss most about that life? So you can really think about what's one thing that you really miss most about life before the pandemic. What are you glad that you're no longer doing? So there were things that I did before, like rushing home from work to run my kids to gymnastics and soccer, and basically felt like a drill sergeant because we are involved in so many activities. You gotta hurry up so we can get home for dinner. You know, put your shoes on. Why are you moving so slow? And I had the opportunity to really take a step back during this time of the pandemic and be able to enjoy my children a little bit more. We weren't involved in so many activities, so there was no rushing from here to there to everywhere. A lot of the things maybe that we've seen happen during the pandemic, we hope will continue, that makes our life a little bit easier. So really reflect on, what do you want to bring that was life before the pandemic? And to the next one, what did you enjoy most about some of this time during the pandemic? Yes, it was hard. Yes, we lost loved ones and want to acknowledge that, and it was difficult. But what are some of the positives? And how can we bring that into where we're moving forward into life after the pandemic? I think that that's an important part for all of us to reflect on and really figure out, how can we merge those two lives? This is going to look different no matter what. Life will be different and look different. I think one of the great things that came out, because I really dislike grocery shopping, is that I can just shop online and drive through and pick it up. So is that something I will continue going forward? Absolutely. So think about some of those things in your life that made your life a little bit easier, that you can reflect on, and some things that you stopped doing that you don't have to pick them all back up. There's no reason that you have to resume life as normal. Do you have to rush here and there? Do your kids need to be in all the activities? Do you need to be a part of so many different committees and activities? Can you learn to say no? So saying yes to those things that give you joy and make your life meaningful, and saying no to the things that don't. So hopefully you guys will take a little bit of that advice, maybe some time when you go home to reflect. And I think that should help frame all of our lives after the pandemic. That's all.
What does the fall look like?
What does the fall look like? So I'm hopeful that the fall will bring vaccinations for the 5 to 11-year-old group, that we will have. So the FDA approves in these chunks of ages based on the studies that are conducted. And so first it was 18 and up, 16 to 18, now 12 to 15, and then we're gonna have 5 to 11. So I'm hopeful that by the fall, if not September, hopefully October, that we'll have vaccinations available for that segment of children. And so we'll move even closer to population immunity. In the fall, I also think, though, hopefully, as people are getting their COVID vaccines, that they'll also, this year we have record numbers of flu vaccinations, okay, that people will continue that trend. So we don't see a lot of kids with influenza or other respiratory illnesses. But I think the fall look very similar to the fall of 2018, meaning children will be back in school. I think most districts are thinking of alternative ways that children can. There are some kids who thrive online, meaning this was a great way for them to learn. There are kids who, and some teachers too, who think that this is a great way for them to teach and learn. And so I think we'll start to see some innovation. Definitely medicine went through lots of innovation during that time. Telemedicine, I mean, we forced a lot of, COVID-19 forced a lot of us to embrace telemedicine. So I think we'll see a new and improved in terms of fall than what we normally see with new technology and things that we can continue doing to bring some of that into the fall.
So we talked about flu, those are still here. We have some diseases that we have eradicated and no longer have the shots to work. Others are going to be with us forever. Where do you see COVID falling on this? Do you think this is going to be around for generations to come?
I do. We have had other coronaviruses that are still present that cause other, like other respiratory kind of colds and infections. I mean, this will be a virus that we will have to contend with, I believe, moving forward. And what does that look like? I think we'll probably see maybe annual vaccination if the variants, if we continue to have variations. How long that will continue probably depends on the severity and the efficacy of the vaccines that we have now. I think that's still like in the cards, still to be written, but it's going to be here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, yes. How do you think it's best to continue to avoid shaking hands in the future?
That's a good question.
I lived in Sophia for 3 years and they put their hands on their thighs and they bow. And they wear masks when they're sick. And they take their shoes off when they go in masks and they just said a clean society. How would we get to that?
And some of the reasons why that is because in Asia, they had to deal with other SARS and MERS. And since when that happened, that's why you would see people who were from certain countries who always wore masks when they were on the plane, when you see people out at other leisure or recreational events. And so I think that it is something that we will continue to see people who are more comfortable wearing a mask. It's not a bad thing.
If someone reaches out and shakes your hand,
or many people are still using the elbow. So I don't know, I don't have the answer for how we change our societal norms, but I think there will be a mix of it. During this time period, I got my new job at University of Houston College of Medicine. I previously worked at Baylor. And the first time I went to clinic, I was just so out of practice of meeting people and so happy to be there that I extended my hand to shake somebody's hand and he was like, oh, I haven't shaken anybody's hand. And I was like, sorry, I was just excited. And happy to be there. So I don't know, as we continue to kind of go back to work, I think we'll have to set some of those norms and make it okay. Make it okay. I'm not offended if you don't shake my hand or if somebody gives a fist bump. I think we've all kind of been indoctrinated to that a little bit. So hopefully nobody's offended, but I don't know that we will change our societal norms in terms of greeting people to bow or anything else like that. But I think you have a good idea of this. Yes, ma'am.
what information would you give to someone who may be afraid to make
So I usually try when I talk with my patients, I have patients who come in every day who are still not vaccinated. So when I ask them specifically, what are you afraid of? What can I clear up for you that you have questions about now? And there are some people who are like, I'm just against shots. I'm not doing it. I don't believe it. And it's hard to really answer that in a way that would convince that person that this is good for you. But I also try to give out information so that that person can feel like this is your decision. This is the evidence. These are the facts. This is what I know. And this is what I don't know. We don't know how long this immunity is going to last. We don't know, if we'll have to get a booster shot, if it will protect you against certain variants. And I'm very open and clear that there's lots of stuff that we don't know. But what we do know is that 95 to 100% of the time with Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, that you will not go into the hospital from COVID-19 if you get this infection, and you won't die. So that's what I want to prevent. I want to prevent you from dying. I want to see you next year. I want to see you in 3 months. months. I want your family to see you, moving forward and for you to watch your children grow up, et cetera. So that's what I tell them. Specifically about the blood clotting issue, there is very rare, meaning, and there's so much evidence in regards to these vaccines. Nobody questioned when they got the tetanus vaccine, how many people had gotten it before, what are the side effects, all of these things. So nobody questioned. And so I also like to mention that there are side effects to those too. And this is a super rare side effect, just like initially there were reports of people with allergic reactions. They're super rare. Could it happen to you? The same chance if you win the lottery, or even less. So I just, try to really relate to them and get at the core of what their questions are, and try to allay those fears. But I think that the evidence is clear that this will prevent you, if you are infected, from going into the hospital or dying. And here at the Texas Medical Center, if you go into the hospital for COVID-19, there's a 10% chance that you will leave, not out the front door, but through the upper elevator. So.
Give me an answer to this question. People who don't get the vaccine say that there's not been enough study. We don't know what's going to happen. You're going to get sick later on down the line. Children are going to have side effects and not be able to, have their children of their own. What do you say to people who say things like that?
So there are things that we know and things that we don't know. There's absolutely no way to determine if this vaccine is going to affect fertility. There's no way. The reason, and because there's no study that's being done to evaluate that. So there's no way to say that it is or that it's getting, that it is not. And there's no indication that it is based on the people who have actually had COVID-19. So women who have developed COVID-19 who have become pregnant during or after, have not had increased rates of miscarriage, have not had increased rates of infertility. When the studies were first done, we hadn't even been out more than 6 months. And you need, in order to be infertile from a female standpoint, you need to not be able to conceive even though you're trying for at least 6 to 12 months. So we didn't know that information. I don't know where people came up with that infertility kind of issue. And how would you know that this vaccine caused that infertility issue and not something else? So when people mention that, I'm like, it just doesn't add up. Also for men, there's no way nobody is detecting, okay, today I'm gonna conduct a study where I do a sperm count on you and then I'm gonna give you the vaccine and then I'm gonna recount what your sperm count is going forward in terms of infertility. So I try to tell people those studies are not, number one, being conducted. They're not really, I don't want to say important because some people might think that it is important, but nobody's going to fund that. They're funding to try to figure out if you're going to die or get sick. And so there have been no evidence, and even there is a study that's ongoing with women who are pregnant, and the early information from that does not reveal that they have had increased rates of miscarriage or early preterm labor. None of that has occurred, and that their babies are fine. Actually, their babies have antibodies against COVID because they have gotten the vaccine and they passed it on to their babies. Many women who are concerned about the vaccine who also say, oh, I don't want to get it because I'm breastfeeding. But that's the reason why you breastfeed. So you can pass on those good antibodies to your baby. Yes, get that vaccine and give that baby some of those great antibodies rather than, we have to wait until so many months until the babies can be vaccinated. So that's what I would say.
So thank you, Dr. Lepore.
You're welcome.
Do you have any questions? A few announcements before we go.